from both a faith perspective as well as, if you would call, a more scientific perspective as well. We are, as I said, faith-based 501c3. You can log on to our website at igbatt.com or igbattmho.org to find out more about us. If you'd like to donate, you can do so online. There's information there, and welcome. Today I wanted to talk to different people. Today I wanted to talk specifically to people who have been impacted by severe and persistent mental illness, or mental illness negative situation, but in particular those of you who have been impacted by persistent mental illness. And as we talked about before, when we use the term severe and persistent mental illnesses, we're talking about illnesses that are so severe, mental illnesses that are so severe that they impact all aspects of an individual's life. And all mental illnesses do that, impact thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. But with severe mental illnesses, sometimes you'll hear the term severe mental illness, sometimes you'll hear the term severe and persistent mental illness. But what we mean are talking about those diseases that are so severe that they impact maybe how a person lives, how their functioning level, and their ability to work, their ability to have families, to stay in relationships. So it's a little more negative, I should say that. The symptoms could be more severe. But it doesn't mean that that individual who's living with a severe mental illness can't move forward in life, because many of them do. Many of them, as you know, as I'm talking to you, many of you who are listening to me who are living with a severe mental illness, you are married, you do have children, you are working, so it's possible. The key is recognizing what's going on and getting the help and support that you need. But in honor of Mental Health Month, I wanted to take this broadcast to talk about and take an inspiration from this individual that I came across. His name is Darius Cooks. Some of you may have already heard from him. He's like a famous chef that does a lot of cooking on YouTube videos and things of that nature. And it's entitled Inspiration from Darius Cooks, You Can Begin Again. And I had an opportunity, our secondary topic for today is maintain your mental health just like you do your physical health. That's our secondary topic. Maintaining your mental health just like you do your physical health. Just a background, I had an opportunity to listen to Darius Cooks a few years ago. He was on a show that I was watching, Larry D. Reed. I happened to watch that particular YouTube show, and he was talking. This was Darius Cooks, this famous chef, evidently had like 3 restaurants throughout the country, famous restaurants that were doing well, and he suddenly shuttered all 3 of his restaurants. And there was some controversy around that, but he was on the show and he was talking about why he did that, right? And I'm just paraphrasing. And one of the things that he talked about was his life living with depression. And he talked about how he got to the point where he just decided, I'm just going to shutter all 3 of them. And I thought that was so profound. But what I really liked, the part where he said something, he said, this is something I created and I can create again. And I want to leave that point with you. And again, I'm taking this from Darius Cooks. He said, this is something I created and I can create again. This is a famous person who, I'm not going to say at the height of his career, because he still, has a career. But, these 3 successful restaurants that he just decided to shutter because his mental health was more important. Not only was his mental health more important, he had enough in him. He had enough strength, ego strength in him to say, hey, I created this, I can create again. And what I'm saying to many of you who are living with a mental illness is that we need to take that particular attitude. Some of you need to take that particular attitude because some of you are not maintaining your mental health well. And what I mean by maintaining your mental health is just like when you do your physical health. If you go to see your doctor and your doctor says, you have a particular disorder that if you lose 50 pounds, you won't have to have an operation, many of us will lose the 50 pounds. Many of us are eating right, we're losing weight, we're exercising, we're taking our medications. Why? Because we want to be physically fit. Well, we need to do the same thing when it comes to mental illness. Keep in mind, mental illnesses are brain disorders. we're talking about diseases of the brain. We don't know why, the exact cause, but we do know that mental illness impacts the brain. Just like the heart can be impacted, the brain can be impacted. And once the brain is impacted, it can cause all types of challenges to the rest of the body. So when we're talking about mental illnesses, we are talking about an illness that needs to be managed just like you would manage a physical illness, right? So what does that mean? That means if you're diagnosed with a mental illness and if you have to take medications, you need to take the medications. If you're not going to take the medications, this is not going to work for you. You don't want to be on medications the rest of your life, which is fine. But then you and your doctor should get together and come up with a plan how you can do that. Okay? Some of you may need to talk to someone. And it doesn't mean that you have to talk to a therapist. You can talk to a friend, a family member. You could talk to your clergy member, whoever, right? But you might need to talk to someone. But whatever it is that you have to do, that you have to take care of yourself, I want you to do that. First of all, let me start from here. If you were, and I think I said this before, but I'll say it again. Many times, you see on the news and you hear people talk about after a crisis happened, a person maybe kills himself or dies by suicide, or if something happens in the news where a person may cause harm to someone else, and it turns out that he or she had a mental illness, then we want to start talking about mental health issues and wonder why. But I think it's important for us to realize that if we're minding our mental health, there are a couple of things that we have to remember. Number one, it is your responsibility to take your medications if you have to take your medications. Just like if you have a medical illness or a physical illness, you have to take your medications. If you are in an actively psychotic state and your loved one is in an actively psychotic state and they're unable to make the decisions for themselves, then that's where you may have to step in. And you may have to become aggressive. You may have to really be a strong advocate. You can't take no for an answer, okay? If you know that you're dealing with a mental illness and you're living with someone who is impacted by a mental illness, severe mental illness, or you're the person with a severe mental illness, as soon as you get out of the hospital, let's start from there. Getting out of the hospital, the starting point, okay? As soon as you get out of the hospital, you want to make sure that you're following up with your doctor's recommendations, whether that's therapy, medications, or whatever the case is. You want to make sure that you develop a plan, okay? You want to take a look at what happened. How did I wind up in the hospital? What thoughts, feelings, and behaviors were aggravating me more so? What was going on with me, right? You want to have a conversation. You want to begin to develop a plan so that if something happens like this again, you know what to do. Now, for those of you who are living with someone who has been impacted with a mental illness, relapse doesn't just happen overnight. Now, relapse, when we're talking from a mental health perspective, is not like a person stops taking their medications and boom, that's it. It's not like maybe some other diseases. When we're talking about a mental illness, it may be a period of time before you realize that this person is not taking his or her medication before you see symptoms. And that's the challenging part. That's the problem. It's because by the time we act sometimes, it's too late and the person is back at the hospital or they're back actively psychotic. We want to be able to catch relapse signs. We want to be able to catch signs. We want to know the signs and symptoms, and we want to be able to catch it before it gets to be too bad. So again, we have a responsibility when we talk about minding our mental health to pay attention to how we're feeling. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're taking our medications when we can, that we're reaching out for help. And then on the other side, you have a responsibility when you see your loved one who is struggling in that moment and who may not be able to take their medication or understand that they need to take their medications, that you're there and can act as an advocate. Now, so that's one of the things I wanted to point out, because many times when people go into the hospital is not the end of the world. Going into the hospital, the psych hospital can be a beginning, can be the start of a new beginning. If you have to go into the hospital, for many people, that's where you find out what your diagnosis is, you get on the right medications, you're connected with a therapy team out in the community, or a doctor out in the community. It can be a start. The thing is that you have to follow through, and that's to family members as well. You don't want to, once your loved one goes into the hospital, be so happy that they're in the hospital that you forget about them. You want to visit them. You want to talk to the doctors. You want to have a conversation. You want to begin to partner with them so that we can begin to develop a plan for when they get out. So once they get out of the hospital, you want to start having that conversation. Okay, what went wrong? What can we do differently? So that you can recognize the relapse signs, the symptoms, before they get bad. Okay, so you have an obligation to do that. Also, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on with you. If you find yourself, that you are, starting sleeping more, eating more, that your symptoms are coming back, take a look at what's going on in your life. Stress is a trigger. What do we mean by stress? Stress is anything, it could be good or bad, that impacts you in a way that's negative. So a wedding could be stressful. Having a child could be stressful. Getting married can be stressful. All of these things are good things, but they can be stressful. So when we're talking about living with a severe mental illness, one of the things, or mental illness in general, one of the things that's a trigger is stress. So you could be, doing well, and you could 3 restaurants could be stressful. 1 restaurant could be stressful. It doesn't mean that if you say, I have to step away because my mental health is causing me stress, that there's something wrong with you. No, that means there's something great about you. And I brought up Darius Cooks because I thought that was so, to be able to do that's someone who's not caught up in pride, someone that's not caught up in ego. Because we have a lot of pastors, and now I'm talking to pastors or people in leadership who really should not be in leadership. You really should not be pastor as far as leading people because of your medical condition. We want to start seeing mental illness, mental diagnosis for what it is, which is a medical condition. If I have, if I'm going on a trip and I'm, say, diagnosed with diabetes, I'm going to make sure that I take my medications. I'm going to make sure I eat right. I'm not going to go out and, eat and drink anything because I have diabetes. If I have, any other type of disease, I have to watch what I eat. I have to watch my stress. Sometimes I can't be around certain people, right? Or because of my allergies, it will trigger. So you have to start looking at mental illness from that perspective. When there are certain things you have to pull away from. If you're in a stressful job, or if you're in a job, you might have to have the courage to walk away. For example, pastoring can be hard for some people. Let me say that. Pastoring is hard for anybody. Anytime you're in a leadership position, there's a lot of stress that comes along with that. There are a lot of challenges. There are some people who can handle it better than others, and some people who can't just because of their medical condition. It doesn't mean that you have a problem, that people are bad, or it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, like I said. It just means that you may have to step back. Living with a mental illness or being diagnosed with a mental illness doesn't mean, I say again, there's something wrong with you, that you're not trying enough, that you did something wrong, or that it's your fault. Living with a mental illness, it just means that you're living with a mental illness. But we have to learn how to live with it. Right? You don't want to fight it. You want to live with it. The most important thing that we can do is begin to accept it. What do you mean accept? Acceptance doesn't mean giving up, or it doesn't mean continuing to pray and believe in God for your complete healing on this side. That's not what it means. Acceptance just means you coming to the point where you realize you have a medical condition that you're going to have to live with, that you may have to live with for the rest of your life. And what does that look like for you? And you have to be honest. Unfortunately, too many people are fighting the diagnosis. You're not doing well. You're struggling emotionally. You're struggling physically. It's harder on you. But rather than take the medications or talk to someone or to even step back, you want to keep moving forward. Well, that's nothing but pride. Some of you are asking God for a healing. You're asking God to help me, and you're asking God to do certain things, and it's getting harder and harder. And, God is saying, could be saying to some of you, you may need to step back. You may need to find another job. You may need to do something different. Pastoring is not the end of the world. You can do something different. But here's the thing. God doesn't need you to suffer for Him. He already did that. Okay, and when I mean suffer, we're talking about suffering physically. You don't have to walk around in pain walk around, whether that's mentally or physical pain, as a way to show that you have great faith. No, great faith is acceptance. Great faith is trusting God. The highest form of faith is being able to trust God and trust in Jesus Christ, trusting His Holy Spirit. What does that look like? That means trusting Him where you get to the point where I've prayed, I'm going to praise Him, I'm going to trust, and I'm going to move forward. Okay? God doesn't have a vendetta against you because you have to step away from something that at the moment is not good for you. It's not good for you physically. It would not be good for someone who is diabetic and who likes to eat a lot of candy, maybe to work in a candy shop. He or she may need to do something different, right? He or she may need to go work, I don't know, in a vegetable shop or something. So you just have to get away and do something different. There's nothing wrong with that. Because, see, the battle is not yours. The fight is not yours. What happens is, from a spiritual standpoint, the enemy, remember, decides to kill, steal, and destroy. And if he can kill, steal, and destroy you by causing you to get caught up in pride, and you're engaging and taking on tasks that are too great for you, that you spend all your time trying to stay well and maintain your health, that you're not living your life. Jesus Christ has come that we might have life and life more abundantly. Okay? Being in the right, not just the right season, but being in the right job, being in the right location, doing what you're supposed to be doing at that moment is important for you. If the enemy can get you out to the point where you're fighting, some of you, you're doing a job, you're getting up every morning, you go into this job, and I understand that we need the money. We all need the money. I'm not saying that we definitely need to quit our job, but you may need to come up with a plan for how you can step back or how you can do something different, okay? Pastoring is not the only thing you can do, or at least being head of sitting at the top of an organization is not the only thing you can do. You can do other things. You can reinvent yourself. You can ask the Lord for another idea, another strategy, another way out. But when we talk about taking care of our mental health, which is maintaining your mental health, you have to really look at, what am I doing? What behaviors am I engaging in that's not good for my mental health? Do I need to step away from certain people? And let me say this here. A lot of people will do that. So I need to step away from certain people. But there's an emotionally healthy way to do that, okay? If you are, people step away from people, you don't have a conversation with the person, you don't sit down with the individual, and I'm not talking about the person is beating you up. I'm not talking about that. But there are some of you who use that as an excuse. That's not that's the exception, that's not the norm. What happens is when you are a person is sometimes that has been dealing with rejection, has been dealing with low self-esteem, has got this thing in your mind where people don't think they don't think much of me, or basically rejection and all this stuff going on. You can be a person that will cut people off, and you don't even give people a chance, and you think that's a badge of honor. That is not a badge of honor. It's emotionally healthy people are able to have a dialogue, are able to have a conversation, are able to say, hey, this is what's going on, this is why, blah, 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 to get the other side of the story, even if you don't agree. But when you cut somebody off, that's not emotionally healthy. That's actually emotionally immature. Okay, there's something going on. So I just kind of want to say that. How do you say that's emotionally immature? Yeah, that is. Now, especially if you call yourself a believer in Jesus Christ, that is not only is that emotionally immature, that's spiritually unbiblical. Because the Word of God lets us know there's a way to handle difficulties. He said, if your brother, you go to your brother, you explain to him what the issue is. We have a conversation, because the whole idea is about reconciliation, not separation. People who like to separate, okay, there's usually something else that's going on. Now, could it be that the person, hurt your feelings, or you're offended, or whatever the case is? Sure we are. Sure we get offended. A lot of things that are not good for us, people that are not good for us, we have to walk away. The problem is not walking away. The problem is not separating ourselves from other people. It's how we do it. It's how you separate yourself from other people. It's the rationale, it's the impact. Those are things that you have to keep in mind. But again, sometimes we may have to do that. Sometimes we may have to get another job. And again, I'm talking about taking care of your mental health. Sometimes you may have to get another job. Yeah, this job is paying me, $200,000 a year. You may have to find a job that's paying you $100,000 a year. You may have to what do you call it, restructure your life where, maybe you got 3 Maseratis, you may have to get rid of 2 of them and, scale down to 1 so you can walk away from that particular job. Whatever you need to do, because your mental health is important. Your mental health is not just impacting, poor mental health is not just impacting your health mentally, is impacting your health. As we talked about before, mental health, stress, leads to all other types of challenges. Stress, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, it impacts your health. It impacts your eating habits. You eat too much, eat too little, eating the raw food. You're not exercising. You're anxious. You're worried. Your mind racing thoughts. So we have to take a look at managing our mental health, and what does that look like? Managing our mental health means seeing your primary care doctor on a regular basis, having your annual physicals. Like I was saying before to the ladies, if you need getting your regular mammograms, your regular pap smears, the men getting your regular your prostate exams. That whatever you need to do, you need to take care of yourself. Stop drinking so much sodas. I'm not saying not to drink any sodas because I'm guilty, but we have to cut down on our sodas. We need to start drinking more water. We need to start eating more real fruit. We may start taking our vitamins. Whatever it is that we need to do that so we can be healthy. Okay? When you talk about mentally healthy, means managing taking your medications on time. If you're not going to be able to take your medication, you don't want to take them, talking to your doctor and having a conversation. Some men, I know for example, don't like taking certain medications because how it impacts them sexually. The sexual drive, and sometimes they'll stop taking it. Well, don't do that. You want to have a conversation with your doctor, because there are ways around that. So again, I thought I wanted to share this from Darius Cooks, because I know a lot of people follow him and like him. And if somebody like that, okay, who is a millionaire with these 3 restaurants, can walk away because of his mental health, you can do it too. And he walked away, but with the attitude of, this is something I created, I can create again. And you may say, well, this is the only job I have. I'm not a Darius Cooks. I'm not, maybe smart like that, or I may not be creative like that. Well, you are smart and you are creative. You just got to pull it out of yourself. You just have to ask the Holy Spirit, Lord, give me a plan. What can I do? What's in my hand? What have you given me to do to kind of sustain myself? Because we all have something. We just never thought about it before, because we've never been in that particular situation. Right? Lord, what can I do? Lord, I need another job. Lord, show me how to make ends meet. If I walk away from this job, or I start working for myself. And everybody can't work for themselves. Everybody shouldn't work for themselves. Everybody's not disciplined enough to work for themselves. So you don't want to kind of necessarily get caught up in that. But you may have to find another particular job. Instead of being the president, you may want to step back and be the vice president. Or instead of which just as stressful, but maybe instead of being the vice president, you may want to become a director. You want to kind of lower your stress level. You want to take a look at that. Life is stressful enough. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people are on edge. You see it in how we're driving. This particular lady, she was sharing how she made a mistake, and cut this guy off, and he pulled out a weapon on her. Thankfully, it didn't escalate any further, but this is what people are doing. People are driving. When you look at them, you see some of these people driving, they look as if they are, something is going wrong with them mentally. You have people in the store, you have people slapping people, you have people cursing people out, you have people, everybody's just on edge right now, right? So we all have to manage our stress. So what are we talking about? What is the impact of not maintaining our mental health? Or the impact of not getting treatment, of not getting the support that we need? Okay? I just want to make sure I'm watching my time. What is the impact? Well, there are a couple of things. The impact, first of all, of untreated mental illness, that it impacts our long-term functioning. Many mental illnesses are seen or can be seen when a person is young or younger. And if a person doesn't get the support that they need at the time, they can go through life being negatively impacted. They go through life not being able to keep a job. They go through life not being able to engage you have healthy relationships with other people. I think a few weeks ago I talked about the gentleman in New York who had, what did he do? He had shot several people in New York, and we were looking at his history. And this was someone who had been, he was in treatment, he didn't stay in treatment, he had apartments, he got kicked out of his apartments, he couldn't keep a job, he wasn't, of course, taking his medications, so he had a lot of problems socially. He used to get into fights with people. This is the impact. These are some of the characteristics of a person who has an untreated or poorly treated mental illness. I also, told a story, maybe not to this audience, but I was working with a gentleman before who was a great kid. He had gone away to school, first year in college, and he started having some challenges in school. So he had to come back home, some mental health challenges. And he came into our clinic for the first time. And now the first time when a person comes into the clinic, or they don't know what's going on with them, it can be stressful. It can be, stressful. You going into someone for the first time and they're telling you, hey, this is what we think is going on with you, and these are the medications we suggest that you can take. It can be stressful. Understandably, his parents didn't take it too well, because this was a kid who was #1 in his high school class. He had gotten a full scholarship to an Ivy League college. He was doing well. And just like so many family members, friends and family members, you think that when a kid goes away to school, that it's something, that somebody put something in their drink, they were smoking too much, somebody did something to them. And I'm going to let you know, no, many times that is not the case. What happens is when a person goes away for the first time, whether it's school, military, or they move out on their own, the stress, because there's a term that we have, what happens is we're used to our loved ones, okay? Your loved one is your loved one. My friend is my friend. I'm used to the way this particular person behaves. I'm used to the way this person acts. I'm just used to this individual. But when they go away to school, or they go away to college, school, college, or military, they're around people who are not used to definitely the way they act, right? They're not used to, the people around them are not used to them, and they're not used to the people. So that's when you start seeing the stress. That's when the stress of the new environment, the stress of school, the stress of the military starts triggering the symptoms that they always had. The symptoms they always had, but those symptoms were dormant. It just wasn't triggered. It wasn't triggered until they got into the right environment. So they were fine, okay, as long as they were home. They were fine as long as they were around a familiar environment. But as soon as when they got into an unfamiliar environment, the stress of that unfamiliar environment triggered. So they were already had a predisposition for a particular diagnosis, but it took the stress to trigger it, right? So what happened to him, he was in school, came back, so we're working with the family and, trying to help them to kind of understand. And, we suggested that he kind of maybe sit out the rest of the semester and just kind of, get himself together, because the school was willing to hold the scholarship for him, and they agreed you could have come back next year. But no, the parents, him and the parent, no, we're gonna do this. We're gonna try this again. They tried it again. It didn't work out. He was sent home, and this time that was kind of it, because he got worse. And we watched this individual, but we watched him, just continue to decline. And sometimes this happens. Sometimes when before a person can move forward, sometimes they have to move backwards. So for those of you who don't, I'm just asking you to give the rest of your brothers and sisters a break. When you see someone, it's easy to say, well, they should take their medication. Why don't Kanye West take his medication? Well, if they gave him the medication, he doesn't want to take it. Kanye West is no different from any other person who's been diagnosed, especially a high-functioning individual who's been diagnosed with a mental illness. That happens. Just like a person with a substance use disorder. Okay, you may start not drinking, not doing drugs, you start doing the meetings, and then as time goes on, the individual or you start feeling better, and you start feeling like you want to test the diagnosis. So you start, I can take one drink, I can take 2 drinks, and before you know it, you're back where you started. It's the same thing with a mental illness, right? People sometimes, when they first get the diagnosis, it takes a while before they really believe it. Acceptance doesn't come overnight. I talked about acceptance earlier. That doesn't come overnight for some people. Having to take medications for the rest of your life and accepting that doesn't come easy for some people. Getting to the point where you realize that this is something that you have to live with, and you have to maintain your medications, maintain your mental health for the rest of your life is not easy. It's a process. It takes some time. Some people easier than others. So again, unless you have to take medications, or you've been told that you have to take maybe 4 or 5 different medications the rest of your life, then maybe you should, I'm going to say be quiet, but maybe you should just listen and learn. I'll say it like that. Maybe you should listen and learn and just kind of be sympathetic and try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, because it's not that easy. It is a challenge. But this young man, it took a while. It took a while for him to get to the point where he realized that he needed to take his medications. And by that time, a lot of time had passed. A lot of things that maybe we could have done differently didn't happen. So again, it takes a while. Then we have another story of another young man, a similar situation, who was just lost. I mean, he got to the point where he had stopped taking his medications, was living with his family. You know, his family tried to do the best that they could. They attempted for a while. And let me say this, shout out to family members who are struggling or trying hard to get their family members the support that they need. I'm saying to you, first of all, kudos and keep trying. Don't ever give up on your loved one. I don't care if you have to call the mayor's office, the governor's office, make 100 calls. You need to do what you need to do, because you are the only person that your loved one may have. So shout out to you. I know it's not easy, and for you, you have to take care of your health as well. But I know it's not easy. This particular person that I'm referring to, his family tried to get the guardianship. They tried to do a lot of different things. It just didn't work out. As time went on, he was just lost. I say lost to the streets, because he stopped taking his meds, which happens, and not taking medication sometimes for certain diagnoses is not a willful act. Not taking medications is a symptom of the disorder. So just keep that in mind. When a person doesn't want to take their medications, that is a symptom of the disorder. Okay? So again, this particular person wound up stabbing a young lady. Now he's spending the rest of his life in jail, in prison, because his mental health was poorly treated, and he wound up killing someone. So 2 lives are gone. So what am I saying? The impact of a poorly treated mental illness, the impact of not minding your mental health or taking care of your health can be crime or violence, but it can be, more importantly, lost, wasted time, loss of, you could have done this and you're not able to do it, jail, prison. We have a lot of people who are diagnosed with a mental illness who are not taking their medications, or poorly treated mental illness, or filling up the jails or the prison system. We have a lot of people that are homeless. We have a lot of people taking drugs. We have a lot of people that have been negatively impacted by severe and persistent mental illness. Some of you're not able to be the father or the mother that you need to be because of your mental illness. For example, depression. Depression hurts. Not just mentally, but depression can hurt physically. When you're depressed, you don't feel like playing with your kids. You don't feel like helping your kids do homework. You don't feel like maybe, going to work. If you go to work, you're not at your best. So mental illness, depression can hurt. So what I'm saying to you, if you know that there is something going on with you, right? You're not feeling your best. You've been struggling for a while. Number one, you don't have to struggle. There's hope out there. Number 2, if you know that what your diagnosis is and you have a treatment plan, follow the treatment plan. Okay? Begin to get to the point where you have to manage your mental illness. And again, I don't care who you are. You could be sitting at the top of a CEO position at the top of one of the biggest organizations in the world. You need to mind your mental health. You need to realize that it's not the end of the world if you have to do something else. You don't get a badge of courage, a badge of honor for struggling. You know, I'm able to make it. You know, you don't get a badge for saying, you know, you get to heaven and the Lord's going to say, shout out to you because you have diagnosed with depression. You didn't take your medications. You suffered through this anxiety. You suffered through these hearing voices. You know, you didn't get to the full potential, but you suffered through, and here's an award for that. You don't get an award for suffering. You know, and I know some of you Christians are, because I can hear it. I know what you're going to say. That particular scripture. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about with those of you who think it's a badge of honor to have a diagnosis and you're struggling through. I'm talking to those of you who are listening to me right now and you know you're not well. You know you're not mentally, something is going on with you. You know that you're depressed, that this depression, and I'm not talking about just sadness, but you know you're feeling depressed. You know you're feeling anxious. You know you're worrying too much. You know you're getting to the point where you can't sleep, where you're restless. You know you're eating too little. You know that you're having thoughts of killing yourself or dying by suicide. You know you just thought, some of you are listening to me, you just got up this morning and thought about the quickest way to end your life. Some of you have gone to the window and thought about jumping over. Some of you have thought about, who are listening to me, jumping in front of a bus. Some of you have thought about, you know, maybe just taking some pills and going to sleep. And you are the same people who just got through maybe preaching a sermon. You're the same person who just got through finished